Welcome back, y'all. Thanks for joining us for episode 5, Team Mindset Continued. I'm Dr. Craig.
I'm Dr. Nat.
And we are excited that you guys came back. So actually, I wanted to do something different today.
Okay.
I wanted us to start out with actually a breathing exercise.
Yes.
One of the things I teach athletes is interval breathing or 5-5-5. Some people may say box breathing, which is more imagination of coming up. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to have you close your eyes. I'm going to walk you through. We're going to do 3 cycles. And as a viewer...
What do I do with my hands?
You can place them everywhere, anywhere that you feel comfortable. As the viewer, I would encourage you also to kind of just close your eyes. Let me walk you through this process. So we're going to start here. In a couple seconds, I'm going to have you just breathe through your nose. But listen to the instructions as I give them. All right? All right, we're going to start breathing through our nose now. Keep breathing in. Keep breathing in. Keep breathing in. Hold it. Keep holding. Hold on to that air. Do not let that out. Push it out through your mouth. Push out through your mouth. Keep pushing. Into your lungs. Keep going. Great. Rest. Keep your eyes closed. All right, we're about to go again. Go through your nose. Hold it. Push it out through your mouth. Keep emptying your lungs. Keep emptying. Rest. We're going to go one more time with minimal instructions. In through your nose. Keep breathing. Hold. Push out. Keep pushing. Rest. All right, go ahead and open your eyes. Instant grounding. What does your body feel?
I was taken back to my music theater days, using my diaphragm to push all that air out of my lungs. No, I actually feel almost tingly, not in a neurological problem way, but in a relaxation way.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I'm not having a stroke.
Okay,
but yeah, I don't know. I feel lighter.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
So part of that exercise, again, as people have called it box breathing, I call it 5-5-5 to all my athletes who are watching. We do 5-5-5 a lot. And the purpose is again, as you're breathing in, you're building up a lot of tensity, and then when you're releasing, the goal is that you're kind of releasing all that tension, and even more so, your muscles, what started out pretty tense, are slowly loosening up every time.
It did get easier.
Yes.
Each breath got easier than the one before.
Right. I also like to do 5-5-5. Some people, again, like to do the visual box breathing. My problem or my concern with box breathing is it limits you a little bit, and it doesn't allow you to go maybe to the level that a 5-second breath in is hard to do. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
But you almost have to then prepare yourself, and you start getting into it. And so, again, maybe in a box breath, I'm only getting to 3 seconds. This 5 seconds pushes you a little bit more. It's a little bit more intentional. Plus, you can set a timer and do it. You can just kind of be in that space. I encourage you guys, continue practicing breathing. When you can control breathing, it controls heart rate. It controls blood flow, which ultimately impacts our brain and how our brain may be speeding with thoughts, may be hard to slow down. Just again, a very easy exercise to do for players and timeouts, right? Or when a free throw's happening, or in between serves, or in between plays. It's a very easy strategy to just kind of ground yourself in that moment and just baseline yourself out. Last episode, we talked a lot on reflection and intentionality. We talked about team culture and coaches being able to step back and just have that moment where you're almost grading your performance, as a coach, and what culture am I setting, and what is that culture? Would you use the words welcoming and fun, or would you use strict and structured, or what words are you using to maybe define that? And hopefully our viewers had time to kind of analyze their team, or analyze their style, or for our individual athletes, and analyze their team around them, and consider what steps for growth. But I think today we wanted to take it a little step further to understand culture is more than just team and players, right? Yeah. And I think we wanted to take time to evolve out into understanding what's parents' roles in the culture, what are athletic trainers or personal trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, athletic directors, what are all their roles as it plays in to the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I don't know if anybody takes precedence as they're a hierarchy of where they are fall on the list. But if I would say one of the biggest stakeholders in an athlete's life is a parent.
100%.
And how they communicate and how they talk. Um, just kind of thinking through that, how would you describe a parent's role in the culture?
I think that whether the parent is very active in their child's, athletic career or not, it doesn't matter. Their influence is still powerful as a presence, but also as an absence. And I think that the parents are almost building a culture in the home as the kid is growing up that influences their performance on the field or on the court. And so I think that parents play a much larger role than they probably want to admit sometimes, especially if the kid's not doing great. I think that parents do have a part in that, and they can influence it positively or negatively. Or sometimes neutrally, I guess. But I think that I've had a lot of different interactions with parents of players, of athletes. And the way that the parent speaks to the child, the way that parents speak to one another, if there's more than one parent in the household, the way that parents interact with other people. So the way the parent talks to the athletic trainer, for example, influences that kid, the way the parent interacts with the coach. So, they are part of this system whether they really realize it or not. They play a huge role in influencing the way that the child can perform or the athlete can perform. And so I see a lot of variation in that. One of my big examples of this was Tua. Whenever he got his concussions, there's been all of this talk, especially within this past football season, because he got another one. I don't even know,
Very
September
early.
or October. Yeah. Pretty early on in the football season. And all these people online are like, he should retire. He should retire. And then it came into this conversation of like, well, his dad is a major influencing factor. And like, he doesn't need to retire. He's fine. He can push through. And, that's maybe not the most supportive role that we see a parent play at times, but he's been supporting Tua through his entire high school and collegiate career and now professional career. And it's just as hard for dad to let go of that as it is for Tua to let go of that, even if it is for his own health and well-being. And even if the team docs are saying, hey, you should probably not take any more hits. The role that the parent plays is massive, and there's a cultural component to Tua as well. Being of Polynesian descent, there is a very big emphasis on family that also plays a role in that. So we see it from not only like my high school athletes, but we see it even in the professional level, the highest level of play for football. We see an athlete who is very much influenced by the role that their parent plays, and nothing against Tua's dad, but there is definitely some component of, hey, when do we prioritize the individual versus their role as an athlete? It becomes this really complicated and complex conversation.
And also it goes back to that idea too of Tua or any other athlete has a bigger identity than just football.
Yeah, 100%.
So, I can't help but to hear that he's a football player, he's tough. Yeah, well, there's also a lot more strengths into it, which actually we'll cover here in the next couple episodes.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is just being around some of the summer leagues and whether I was working them or attending them as performance psych or, whatever that looks like, is the intensity of how I'm seeing parents carry themselves.
Yes.
In athletics.
Sometimes the parents care more about the outcome of the game than the kid does.
Right. And I don't know if there's this complex of intensity equates to better performance or, and I'm just seeing these parents become so emotional over things, and become so attached as if that's the identity and their student athlete is the next big thing. And, and not to say that there's not that piece where a parent does need to drive the athlete, but I do think that is conditioned on the athlete themselves, 100%. And a lot of my athletes, I wouldn't say are burnt out by parents, but there is that dynamic of what's the expectations my parents are putting on me, and how are they talking, and I think when I look at athletic directors, what obviously an athletic director and coach's role is challenging because your job is to win.
Yeah.
Your job is literally to have positive outcomes. But I think how do you measure outcomes beyond just, as we've often said, like quantitative data?
Mm-hmm.
What's the qualitative
Yeah.
impact that coaches or you as an athletic director are making?
Mm-hmm.
What do you see the role of the athletic trainer?
Listen, I could make this episode 3 hours long. Diving into this.
Our viewers.
They're like, delete, click out of it immediately.
X.
The role of the athletic trainer in athlete success is, I mean, like, it goes without saying there's this performance piece in terms of having a healthy body, right? The injury prevention piece, yada, yada, yada. Fine. That's not what I'm going to talk about right now. We all understand that. And if you don't, I'm happy to talk about it at length. But I'll save us for this purpose. I think for the context of this conversation, the role of the athletic trainer ultimately comes down to, can we mentally support the athlete as well as physically? So we're doing the injury prevention piece, we're rehabbing them from injury and clearing them to play, but can we also be that person who's sitting at the end of the bench or standing on the sideline who is encouraging the athlete to keep pushing, who's telling them when it's time to stop pushing, when it's time to sit down? How is our language and our verbal language, but also body language, communicating to the athletes and the team how we feel about the situation? I've been at the end of the bench for many a basketball game in my career, many a playoff basketball game. And when things are not going our way, the coaches shift because of that, and the team starts to shift because of that. But for me, as the medical professional, I'm staying positive, right? Like, it's my job to protect the mental well-being just as much as the physical well-being. So whenever an athlete's walking by and they're standing next to me getting water, refilling their water bottle, after they just got subbed out and they're upset about a play that just occurred, I'm the one going, you got the next one, man. Like, keep pushing, we got this. Stay focused. Yeah. Because I'm able to be a little bit detached, right? My job is not dependent on how well the team does. Coach's job is dependent on how well the team does, right? Like, my job's safe in that capacity. And so I'm able to be a little bit more emotionally detached and give them that support from the sideline, which I think is really important. And I think that for me, that's part of being a good athletic trainer. It's not just like, how well do I know injuries? How quickly can I do an eval? How fast can I tape an ankle?
Sure.
That's not what being a good AT is to me. Hey, I'm a pro. But it's not just that. Like, for me, being a good AT is, what does my relationship with the team look like?
Right.
What does my contribution as a member of the team look like? And it shifts based on the team and based on the personalities and the dynamics. But I think that an AT can be a very, very strong emotional support space for teams, and kind of give this like external perspective almost of, hey, maybe I'm not at practice every day, but I can still, contribute to the team in this way. Right. Maybe I am at practice every day and I see patterns that I'm like, hey coach, we should probably address that, right? Like, hey, athletes aren't responding positively to this type of communication. You should maybe think about switching it. I've had those conversations, and it's been fine.
Which I think is funny, because as you were talking, I know our viewers love to see that I'm taking notes a lot. But I wrote down trusting and challenging in our own roles. And I think even going back to last episode, really reflecting a lot on coaches, creating the culture where you trust your team around you to then challenge how we're impacting the culture. Yeah. I would love when players, again, as we kind of talked last episode, would have that conversation with me about the culture or questions or, trying to enhance both of our levels of understanding. And I think also having that culture where coaches weren't afraid, my assistant coaches was not afraid to pull me aside, and have that moment. I think it's also powerful being in the role I'm in, such as at the high school map, where as an administrator, I know my role for culture is oftentimes during game setting. What's my crowd doing? What are my parents doing? And I do hold them accountable. There are many conversations I've had with fans in the stands of I don't know how that feedback is assisting our performance, but it's not. Yeah. Or how we carry ourselves at away games. That is not a representation of who we are, and that's not helping our culture. We want to be able to walk into these games and have a respect about who we are as a culture. And I think it's important for us, again, having those very strategic people placed in our team that enhance the culture and aren't afraid to challenge the culture. But I think even among that group, there has to be a level of trust that that person has the intentions that I want, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
You know, in all the roles that we talked about, you know, I know we didn't necessarily break into strength and training, but I think it all makes sense. I think the biggest piece of takeaway is communication.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You know, and I know you were talking a little bit before show as we were working through the plan of just how important it is to understand your communication style. Can you let our listeners in on that one?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different communication styles, like a lot of different ways that people break it down. But I think we should focus on kind of the big three that I see most often in athletic spaces. And that's an aggressive communication style, which has a negative connotation. So I'm going to reframe that into like being direct, directness, right? We also have a passive communication style, which is kind of our indirect communication. And then the third main one, I call it's manipulative. Again, negative connotation, don't love. So I think we can reframe that into kind of motivational, right? Almost telling white lies to get the athlete to the outcome that you want them to get to. Yes. So not intentionally being deceitful necessarily in a negative way.
So
being mindfully deceitful.
So aggressive or direct,
passive
or indirect, manipulation or motivational. I would assume all three of us.
all three of us. Which personalities are you talking about?
I'm assuming each one of us has all three of those elements. But I think for 1 second, let's take 5 seconds here. Initial thoughts to our viewers and us. What category do you maybe more heavily align yourself to?
In what capacity? As an AT or as a in general?
I would say as in general.
In general, I'm probably more passive or indirect.
And I would probably align a little bit more aggressive and direct. You know.
As an AT though, I'm manipulative. In a good way. Okay? Let's pause. I'm not... Nobody take a sound bite, okay? I'm manipulative in the way that, like, sometimes my athletes don't believe that they're ready to return to play.
They don't have a growth mindset.
They don't. And they're understandably fearful of re-injury. And so I learned how to manipulate them, motivate them.
Reshape their thoughts.
Reshape their thinking and convince them that they can do things. So, like, can I tell a story real quick? Do we have time? Okay. This is one of my favorite stories to tell whenever I'm teaching about rehab programming. So I had an athlete who had a football player. He was a wide receiver. Or no, what was he? He was a DB. So he was he had hurt his hamstring the season prior, let's say his left leg. Left hamstring, pulled it the season prior, was out for a long time, took him a while to get back from it. Running the same exact route on the opposite side of the field, he pulled his right hamstring the following season. So same injury, different leg, back-to-back seasons. And for his second one, it was really, really hard to rehab him because he was so fearful of injuring himself again that he just didn't want to do anything. And, you know, I was working with him for weeks and weeks and weeks to strengthen the muscle. I know I have a lot of knowledge about the healing process. I knew that he was in the phase of healing, like the remodeling phase, where he wasn't going to hurt himself again doing certain things, like within controlled settings. As we got to late stage rehab, he was doing, like frog jumps across the field. He was doing figure eights where he was cutting in these like small circumstances. And he was doing that at like 80% speed, 90% speed. But he never wanted to go all out. Never was comfortable to try to run a route. And it took me a week of literally convincing him that he was fine and saying, okay, we'll do this. So I had him do a different activity, a plyometric activity or a cutting drill that mimicked running a route. And I said, dude, you just did that at full speed. Did you have any pain? He was like, no, I felt great. And I was like, if you can do that, you can run a route. I said, let's run a route at 50%. And eventually wore him down and convinced him that he was fine. And he needed someone to essentially trick him into running again. And guess what? He played the next week after that because he was able to finally get past that mental block, that mental barrier of, I can't do this, I'm going to get hurt again, to, dude, you just did things that are 12 times harder.
Right.
And you did them with ease.
Which, if we would even take ourselves back to that moment, me as a coach, I don't coach football, God.
Can you imagine?
But if I did, again, being aggressive and direct, you got this, go run the route. Get out of your own way, go run the route. You're your own barrier, go run the route. I'm assuming those communication styles would have done more hindrance.
It would not have helped him. Yeah,
Right.
he would have shut down.
It's a negative beat up session because, again, everybody else has seen this about me, and I don't have the internalized belief that it's there yet.
Yep.
And so, therefore, I'm not being taken seriously. I'm not being heard, or maybe I'm weak, or those.
Or I feel insufficient. Somehow.
Those mindsets come in.
Yep.
And so when you teach these strategies, and again, not to say one is negative or positive.
No,
I think they have their place in sport and in communication. Whether you're a teacher, you're a coach, administrator, parent,
and interpersonal communication,
Right.
like. It just depends on the circumstance.
Right.
Right.
And so, how do we challenge our listeners, our parents, our coaches, our players? How do we challenge them to not just grasp their communication style, but to also understand in an abstract way when to use those styles?
Yeah, I think we talk about this a lot. We talked about it a lot last episode, but it comes back down to that reflection piece of, can I take a moment to step back, understand how I communicate with others and how others respond to that? Maybe the way that I communicate with you can be more direct, but the way that I communicate with an athlete needs to be more motivational or manipulative, because of who the person I'm communicating with is.
Right.
I think one big piece about communication, something that I teach, I host communication workshops every once in a while for my students. And one thing that I literally start every workshop with is, it doesn't matter how much you communicate or how good of a communicator you are if they don't comprehend what you're saying. It's all about comprehension, because I can communicate every last detail of something to you, but if you don't understand what I'm talking about, because maybe I'm using all medical terminology, how good did I communicate then?
Yeah.
Not very well, right? Like I'm saying, well, I told him everything about the body and the injury and what was coming next and the prognosis, the yada, 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 but it went right over your head.
Right.
That's not good communication.
Right.
Good communication comes down to how effectively can the other person comprehend what I'm saying. So I think for our stakeholders, our parents, coaches, ADs, ATs, I think that they need to pause and reflect on the way that they prefer to communicate, their default style, and then understand, how do they have to adjust that style? How do they turn that dial up or down based on who they're talking to and what the topic is?
Right. I think hearing you, going back to our magical word, we have hit on a lot, reflect and awareness.
Yeah.
What am I trying to communicate? How am I going to try to communicate this? And who am I talking to? Who's my audience? Because I think as we talked in our planning session, words have power.
Yes.
And what's my intent versus what's my impact? I may have the best intentions to get motivation. Embarrassing story.
Oh, can't wait.
I don't know how in
hit me
depth I
with
can
it.
go. Coaching, we were at a rival high school, and I had a very good team. And at halftime, we were competing with and underperforming. And so at halftime, I was very aggressive and direct and used very ugly language. And not so much of like, oh, I cussed them out type mentality. No, I was aligning their performance to other things that was degrading and just not tasteful. And so I walk out of the locker room. Actually, we weren't even in the locker room. We're in the midst of COVID. I can tell you exactly where we're in the gym. If we visit it, I'll show you where it was. But so we get back to the bench. The team's warming up. I don't think we made 30 seconds in the game, and I hit a timeout. And all I could do was pull the team over, and I was like, how I just communicated to y'all was ugly. My intent was to motivate. And I think my players at the time knew my heart well enough and knew our culture well enough to be like, yeah, we know it. But it still doesn't make the impact that my words had right. And it was about owning that moment of like, no, that is not the way we will ever communicate to each other. That is not a part of our culture. And yes, there was that part of, I'm a psychologist trained at that point, so yeah, I'm reflecting a lot. But there was also a part of there, as a coach, I did not feel comfortable the way I communicated with my team. Right? And so understanding that my intent was to motivate them, My impact probably did, but my impact, I'm part of the culture and I was uncomfortable with what I did to my team and how I communicated to it. And so taking that ownership, being vulnerable with my team. I hated the way I just talked to you guys. And I don't respect that communication. I would never allow you all to ever speak to each other, myself, your parents, the AD. You guys cannot talk like that to them. Therefore, I can't take that. And so taking that ownership. And I think having people in that moment, I think I reacted because I was so angry at halftime. Whatever the circumstances was, I was so angry that I reacted rather than thinking, who was my audience? What is my intent? And what's the impact I'm wanting to make? Asking those questions to understand, what do I need to do here? At that moment, yeah, there needed to be some manipulation and motivation.
Yeah.
There did not have to be some aggressive and direct and ugly conversation. That did not help culture. In that timeout, I think it was very much direct. I was apologizing for my actions, but then there was also some motivation to it of like, it still doesn't change the fact that we're not playing and we're not performing. Right. End of the story, we win. Of course.
Ending with the dub.
What?
I love this conversation of intent versus impact because I think that so often we get stuck on, well, you know, let's say I harm someone. I say something harmful, or you know, I say something I'm not proud of. In your scenario, we get so stuck on, well, I didn't mean it that way. I meant well. I had good intentions. We all have good intentions for the most part.
I hope.
Very rarely are we trying to harm, right? Very rarely. There are situations where we are trying to harm, but for the most part, we have good intentions. I think that we have to understand that it doesn't matter, frankly, what our intentions were. What matters is that outcome, that impact. So we have to be self-aware enough and humble enough to admit, hey, I really did not mean to harm them in that way, but they're telling me that they're hurt and that they're offended by it. It's not on me to be like, no, you're not offended by it. I meant well. Yeah. You know, I didn't mean it like that, so that it doesn't hurt you. We don't get to say that. No. Like, if someone says that what we did was harmful to them, all we can say is, I'm sorry, I'll do better moving forward. Let me learn.
Or what do you need?
Yeah, how can I support you? How can I make it? How can I make it up to you? Yes.
The reflection piece of, okay, the problem's been stated.
Yes.
What's the growth I take away from this? And not being offended that somebody is vulnerable and advocating for what they need. I think in all aspects, especially us that probably align a little bit more aggressive and direct, we sometimes miss that part.
Yeah.
You know, so again, reflecting and what's the growth to come out of it, and not being, like we talked about last episode, so offended by what's being spoken to you. I think we could go on and on about this topic, but I think one of the things that would be important for us is not to miss the part where challenging our viewers to reflect and try to be a little bit more proactive in how you're communicating to your team or your culture, and what's the impact, what is the intent, and how can I change it? Again, sticking to kind of our theme from last week, how can I reflect and keep growing my culture, asking the questions, being proactive, shifting a little bit. Again, I don't think to any of our coaches or parents we're asking for this complete overhaul. I think it's trying to develop more awareness skills so you understand what the impact is, you know, and just how much your words can truly impact. I think the other thing that parents and athletic trainers and psychologists and coaches need to be aware of is, while consciously, you know, in that team huddle, consciously, none of my players thought of anything that I said. But unconsciously, what's the impact? We can never undermine the importance of stored memories and what those words over time. I think we all have examples of where someone has come up days, weeks, months later and said, something you said stuck with me, whether positive or negative. Positive, you're like, oh, I never knew that. Negatively, you're like blown away, like, oh my God, like I'm so sorry. That was not my intention, or I didn't mean it in that way. Can you help me understand? You know, and we probably all have not always handled those situations great too. Like, sorry you took it that way. You know, dismissive almost.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I would hate to jump to takeaways right now, but I do think it's important for us to maybe hit the pause button right now, because I do think that's an important conversation that we could talk for hours, but coaches really need to spend the time, parents need to spend the time, athletes need to spend the time, reflect on, one, what is my communication style in a majority of settings? Yes, we all own variations of all three, but what is my predominant one? And and understanding that while yes it may be successful, that can't be my go-to all the time. And then understanding the intent versus impact. I think that was a great piece. I don't know. Do you have another takeaway from tonight?
Yeah, I think one, as you're talking about all of this, it really comes into a piece that I want them to kind of take home with them and maybe practice is accountability. If you're not familiar with the term or how to take accountability, I always recommend we start small. So taking accountability is owning up to the fact that you made a mistake, or that you caused unintentional harm. Maybe you used language or words that were stronger than you intended them to be, and
or you were too passive and not direct in the moment.
and it led to miscommunication,
an opportunity. Or I have a kid, I'm driving my kid home, and I played so, insert explicits, and the parents like, no, you played fine. Like, and maybe at that point your kid does need to hear the direct. And I'm like, hey, yeah, we hear that. Yeah, you didn't do A, B, and C, but what can we do to change the narrative next game? Or, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
you're
off.
fine, you're fine. Accountability is saying, I did make a mistake. I did cause harm. I did, misstep. And I own up to that. I acknowledge that I did that and I'm sorry about it. And let me learn so I can move forward. So I think for those at home, taking accountability, it's really hard to do it in big situations, but you can practice it. It's a skill. And so I challenge you to practice it in small ways. Whenever you have those miscommunications at work or at school with a colleague, maybe you're at practice and something goes a little awry. Don't get defensive. I think defensiveness is like the number one thing that makes people avoid true accountability. Accountability is saying, I did that.
Yeah.
That was me. I certainly didn't mean to do it, but I did it and it caused harm and I am sorry. And teach me how I can do better. Let me move forward with you. Let's find a way forward together. And that can start really small.
Or reshaped. I did that. I was successful in that moment. What did I do that made that situation successful?
Yeah.
That as well as accountability. So I don't think it's always, the negative impact, but accountability can also be turn the tide. What did I handle super successfully, and how can I learn to take that and build off of that success as well? I think that's awesome.
I think we start small. It gets easier the more you do it. The more you practice something, it's always going to get easier.
Just being growth minded.
Exactly.
If we had
keep coming back to growth mindset.
We should have just a vocabulary wall, reflection, awareness.
That's good. We're gonna add it down here
because our viewers can't read all this already. We so love. We love.
Try one more time.
Edit.
No,
we love spending the time with you guys. I think it's for Nat and I. It's been a growing opportunity for us as well to challenge ourselves with how we go through our day to day, how we work with our clients, our students in all capacities. And again, as we kind of highlighted last session, don't be afraid to reach out to us. Send us an email, send us communication on our YouTube page. We love to get feedback from our viewers. But we're challenging you.
And if there's something that you want to hear about, there's a topic you want us to cover, let us know. Because eventually we'll run out of ideas. Not for a while, but...
I don't know.
But if there's something you're particularly interested in, I want to encourage people to reach out and let us know. And we can develop episodes around that too.
So we ask you to follow us on all socials, like and subscribe on YouTube under Hustling for Headspace. And until next time, I'm Craig.
I'm Nat.
We'll see you later, y'all.
Bye.